middle camera.
Yes.
Here we are.
Good evening. I'm Bonnie Hong.
And I'm Ben Hong.
And this is Norwich Confidential.
It's Wednesday and we're back.
We are back live.
Here. And we're going to be talking a lot of politics tonight. So if you have anything to say, I'm sure that you do. Here's our phone line. Just give us a ring.
Feel free to call. I have invited probably at least a dozen people in social media that live around this area that I've invited all of them to come on and talk about Hillary and talk about her position, but it seems that they...
Well, yeah, I know you've been very active, so we're going to have to show what
which is why I wanted
here is, because I know you've been supporting Sanders.
Absolutely.
Bernie Sanders from the beginning. And as a matter of fact, you were instrumental in having a Bernie Sanders headquarters in downtown Norwich. And of course, you've been supportive of him in the state of Connecticut, as well as in Iowa, as well as in New Hampshire. So let's get that out.
Okay, yes, that is absolutely true. And as well as you've done a public endorsement.
But I listened to all the issues. So we really had been very close to this primary and campaign. And just to show, you know, again, how we react to this, we went to New Hampshire last Friday, stayed at their convention. And that
evening,
they
had their Democratic dinner. It used to be the Jefferson Jackson...
The 1,000 Club or something like, or 100 Club.
100 Club.
But they basically had changed the name to their U.S. Senator. So in any case, the New Hampshire State Democratic Party sponsored
this dinner on every year.
A dinner, which is also a fundraiser. And of course, they also want to introduce who the candidates are running for president of the United States as presented to them as from the Democrats.
But every important Democrat that is in New Hampshire attends this dinner.
Yes.
As well as all of their state senators and their U.S. senators and their U.S. congressmen. So they're all there.
Yeah, basically all the big names of the New Hampshire Democratic Party were there, and not just the governor, the U.S. senator, their congressman, and you know, committee chairman and town party chairman, and they even included the National Democratic chairwoman to address the participants.
Yes. When she was introduced, first of all, to have Nancy Pelosi, not Nancy, I'm sorry, Deborah Wasserman Schultz, who is the Democratic National Committee chairwoman, come in, who has absolutely done everything she can do to derail Bernie Sanders' campaign. Was a bit of a surprise to all of Bernie Sanders' supporters. So that was not making any of them, or any of us, happy.
So in any ways, my reaction to the attendance and the energy in this campaign, and I have to say that I was really impressed, because I've never seen so much, you know,
dancing in the aisles.
So much participation, and especially the young people in the state. And I'm so proud that they are participating in this campaign and the future of the government, because it's to them that this nation is going to be inherited to them. So I was really impressed at how vibrant and how energetic these young people were. And when I say young people, it's about 30 years old or under, or just a little bit above.
Right, from 18 to, you know, 30, 38.
There were just so many of them, and I would say that they practically overrun the entire
they did.
arena. And not only were they just present there, they were very, very active in participating in the debate and so on. So I was really impressed with that. And of course, the next day we were out and doing the sign on the highway.
Some honk and wave up in New Hampshire.
And
we had met a lot of people that were from other states that were up there to help knock on some doors and get the vote out for the last minute voting.
So they asked us whether we want to do phone canvassing. And I said, well, probably not, because I'm sure that every household in this state had been rung, I don't know how many times. And besides, I said, how many people do have the landlines now? Because most of the people don't have landlines anymore. And they have obviously cell phones. So we said, well, we pass on the phone call. So they asked us if we would like to knock on doors. And they were very well organized on that. And I said to myself, I don't think so, because I really think that everybody's door had been knocked 2 or 3 or 5 times. And I don't want to get my face slammed by a door. So we decided to just
do honk and waves. And do you know how much we were noticed? I heard from a number of people that said they saw us out there, and that the signs were great. They were real happy. They said we looked like we were having fun.
Well, we did make it into the newspaper.
We did. From the arena.
From the arena, the newspaper. Our picture was taken. We were having this neon sign, and I think
our lighted signs.
Right, and I think the newspaper photographer took a picture of us, and it was in their front.
One of the
yes.
New Hampshire News.
Right.
And it said, Bernie supporters light up the arena, and they had us there with our lit signs. And it was fun. It was, and you're right. The young people are so energetic. They have to be in order to keep up with Bernie.
Yes.
I don't know how that man keeps the schedule he keeps. I mean, he is. It's unbelievable.
So, in any case, as it turned out, when they were the Democratic State Committee were presenting who the candidates are. It came down from the governor, from the U.S. senators, the U.S. congressman, and the state party chairman. They were all endorsing Hillary Clinton, of course.
Well, they didn't publicly do that. We knew that they had already endorsed her. That would have been an inappropriate forum for them to come out and say that they are endorsing one candidate when both candidates are there as guest speakers. That would have been totally inappropriate, which is exactly what happened. You had a Democratic congresswoman who was actually, I think she was supposed to be introducing Senator Sanders. And rather than do a simple introduction, she made it a very big point to say that although she was doing this introduction, her vote is going to Hillary Clinton. And there was such a reaction from the audience in that arena that the congresswoman could not say another word. She was actually almost literally booed off the stage.
Well, she was drowned out, so she couldn't be heard thereafter. So that was very interesting.
It was inappropriate.
So
inappropriate.
Of course, and if you talked about the atmosphere and the feeling of there, I mean, it really was a very exciting day to be there, because I think everybody there thinks of nothing else but the primary,
just a few days away.
And of course, and we have a few participants and candidates of course, especially the Republicans. That they were all over the place, and they have Ted Cruz and Donald Trump and so on.
Actually, we saw Ted Cruz. He drove by our honk and wave.
Yeah, and
Sarah was very excited about seeing him. That she recognized him, but he drove by with 2 of his limos.
Yeah.
Actually went right up the street to the Comfort Inn.
Yeah.
And apparently that's where he was staying. But we did see a number of other people that were even at the arena. Ben and Jerry made their tour around the arena talking to a lot of Bernie's fans, supporters. They were doing a number of interviews. There was Ben Jealous, who was the head of the NAACP, who had endorsed Bernie. And again, Sarah found him immediately. She picked him right out of a crowd and went up and was able to get a picture with him. So, I mean, I think the other thing that is notable, both Iowa and New Hampshire had a lot of support from Bernie supporters in other states. And in New Hampshire, you had a lot of out-of-town supporters coming in from other states to go up and help knock on doors and talk to people about Bernie. And what was absolutely amazing is that in Connecticut, we have a very active group of supporters in Connecticut. 40% of all of the out-of-state workers that were up in Vermont, they were coming from all over. They came from Maine and Massachusetts, obviously Vermont, New York. I mean, they were coming from all over, but 40% of every volunteer up there was from Connecticut. I thought that was pretty impressive.
And again, these are young people, and they've got so much energy and enthusiasm, and they're so lively. I mean, I cannot keep up with this young people. So in any case, to make the story short, of course, Bernie Sanders won by a wide margin. Now,
I want to talk about the headlines because
and then I will dissect and analyze the winning
election.
and so on.
But you pointed out to me yesterday, you said, look at the New York Times. And I went online and I took a look at it because you read the New York Times every day. And he said, Ben was telling me that the New York Times routinely will have the picture at the front page at the top, and over on the left-hand column, they will have any single thing that Hillary even whispers. It's right there. If there's anything negative about Bernie, it's right below it. Otherwise, Bernie wasn't really being mentioned. So I started watching this, and knowing that this was the largest turnout ever in Vermont for a voter turnout.
In New Hampshire.
New Hampshire. The largest voter turnout. He won by a landslide, actually. And yet, these are the headlines that occur in papers. Even the Norwich Bulletin, I don't know if it's difficult to see, but right down at the bottom, just this little section, right down here, is the headline, Trump, Sanders victorious in New Hampshire. Because up above that, there was the big picture of the cat, 40 felines fill up the facility. But when you go on to read about, after you read the headline, not once does it really talk about the fact that this was a record-breaking turnout, that the landslide was really impressive. They want to talk about how he lost in Iowa. He did not lose in Iowa. Iowa was a tie. Nobody wants to say that. He tied in Iowa and has a landslide in New Hampshire. But that was the bulletin. Then I went on to look at the New York Times, and that one was Trump, Sanders win New Hampshire. That was the headline. Again, not very much about Sanders, but they did talk a lot about Donald Trump. But then with considering that Bernie Sanders really whooped Hillary Clinton, and they just say he wins in New Hampshire, their next byline was Sanders barrels out of New Hampshire, financially competitive with Clinton. So he just apparently barreled out of New Hampshire. Then I went on to look at the Washington Post, and theirs was Sanders, where was theirs? Challenge looms after victories. And then because they wanted to say that, yes, Trump and Bernie Sanders won in New Hampshire, but they have real hard challenges now that are facing them. So they wanted to clarify what will finally be probably the demise of both of these candidates.
So what is your point, Bunny? Tell me us your opinion. Yes.
The last headline. Sanders wins New Hampshire Democratic primary in a landslide. Then the article goes on to actually talk about what the results were, where Bernie Sanders got 60%, Hillary Clinton received 38%, and it really kind of broke it down as to the categories, and then quoted both of them, but that was from Democracy Now, and that was their online internet site. That was the only place that talked about the fact that it really was.
So what is your point?
That Bernie Sanders is absolutely correct when he gave his, when he spoke after the primary yesterday, when he said that this election, that primary election, gave notice to both the political and economic establishment. And that's literally what he's doing, or not what he's doing, what the people in these states are doing.
Well, let's really dissect his campaign points, and let's dissect also what Hillary Clinton's campaign.
All right, but could I just mention one other thing? Sorry, it was what I want to just get back to the fact that we really would like to have someone that supports Hillary come on the show, talk about Hillary and why you support her. There obviously are reasons why you do support her, and personally, I would love to know what they are. So,
anyways, this is, you asked me, well, what do I think about our experience in New Hampshire? Well, I found out that, again, like I said, there were a lot of young people who were very energetic, very vibrant, and all over the place, and they were so excited to have seen Bernie Sanders, and rightly so, because Bernie Sanders do make good speeches, and that is very good. The thing that I'm really looking at this is that, well, why is he turning on a lot of young people? Well, in his campaign agenda, you get to understand that he put all his points across, which I would say that 80 to 90% will benefit the young people, right? So he says there's going to be free college education, while the young people will benefit that. He's going to renegotiate the student loan, because students are now getting out of colleges and universities with over $100,000 debt. So he wants to negotiate that. So that will benefit, of course, the young people. He talks about universal health care, Medicare for all, single payer. Again, the young people will benefit that. He talks about the minimum wage to be increased to $15 an hour. Again, the young people will benefit that. So now, on the other side, the flip side of the coin is that he wants to tax the, was it the 1% or the 0.01?
0.01%.
Because they're not giving their fair share of taxes.
Well, they haven't been, Ben. I mean,
well, I'm just okay, putting them all together, Bunny.
All right.
So, of course, the young people will benefit that. He said that he's going to tax the transactions in Wall Street to pay for these colleges. And health care and so on. So the young people will benefit that. So, and of course, he wants to have companies put their factories in the United States instead of having them go to China. And again, that will create jobs, and the young people will benefit that. So basically, his point is towards getting the young people, the future of this country, to be the ones to carry on forward what this country would be doing. And in his theme, of course, is that he is a Democrat socialist, or is he a socialist?
Democratic socialist.
Right. which basically is saying that yes, we have to evenly distribute the wealth, but at the same time we should have competition, and that there is nothing wrong with capitalism and making profit, except that you just don't have to make such a horrendous amount of profit.
There has to be some fairness in the economy. You cannot, because at this point, because we don't have fairness in the economy, we have ended up with an oligarchy. You have the Princeton University study that came out several months ago, maybe 4 or 5 months ago, that really showed we are not a democracy. We have very little voice in Washington. What we want, what the majority of people in this country want, such as Medicare for all, that is a majority that thinks that we should have Medicare for all. You have the majority's voice is not heard in Washington unless it is heard. It is something also that the oligarchy decides it would also want, or it is not going to hurt them, so go ahead and pass it.
Well, that is exactly the point on the other side of the coin, is what is Hillary's agenda. And basically, she basically seems to be an establishment candidate, meaning business as usual. We are satisfied with the way things are running, and we're satisfied with the way our influences are heard in the government, and that the Wall Street people can continue doing the kind of business that they're doing, because we are giving you a huge amount of donation to your foundation and as to your campaign funding, and therefore we want that direct line to the White House.
But she has changed her stand on almost all these issues. She has, I mean, I was actually very surprised at even the first debate when she, actually after the first debate, when she began to say almost word for word the same thing that Bernie Sanders was saying. So now, listening to her speech after the primary, almost everything was exactly the same. She wants, to increase the minimum wage. Well, she'd increase it to $12, but she's not saying that. She is looking at improving a health program, either improving Obamacare, and I'm not sure if she's even coming back over to where she was 8 years ago, where she was insisting that we have Medicare for all, that we have a universal health insurance. When you listen to what she was saying last night, how she wants to make sure women get equal pay. Bernie's been saying that forever, that not just for pay, but the equality across the board, social equality, is something that she now is talking about, and again, following Bernie's lead. The one thing that she did not talk about was getting money out. Well, she says that yes, she wants to have overturn Citizens United. However, that is not all. It's not just Citizens United that is buying Washington. It's the lobbyists, it's the influence, it's the jobs they're offered by these large corporations. So it's more than just Citizens United. You're looking at a very different approach.
Yes, that's exactly how I feel about that. These are two different candidates, and their impression of what is going on and where to go from now are totally of a different pages, and they're basically trying to say that we have this idea of how we can continue on, and yet at the same time trying to give you equal pay, equal wages, and increase the wages and increase your health care plan and so on. So, and yet on the other hand, Bernie Sanders' position is, well, we're going to change everything from scratch and then put everything.
Well, it's a revolution.
And it is a revolution. So there's quite a bit of difference as far as the concept of how to move forward.
Because the truth has been, you can't move forward as long as the government is still basically controlled by a very few. You know, you've got a handful of very rich that basically can pick up the phone, they can call the senator, the senator will answer. They don't get one of the staff, they get the senator. You know, they get the congressman when they call.
Well, if people are concerned about this, then this is the time to really have your voice be heard, because this is probably the only time that the senator will even respond to you
right now
on email.
Yeah, and that's true. All of them. When I think that what happened in New Hampshire, all of our congressmen were up there. Every single one of Connecticut's congressmen went to New Hampshire. The governor went to New Hampshire. Our senators went to New Hampshire. Every one of them went to campaign for Hillary Clinton.
They want to fill a busload of Hillary supporters.
Yeah, I mean, so because they know that if Bernie did take New Hampshire the way he took it, 60 to 38, in spite of having the Democratic establishment, the party establishment, come out full force.
So my impression also, of course, is that no, Hillary was not doing this on a kind of a light way and saying, well, I know that I'm going to lose, so I'll just give them a token appearance and so on. No,
she fought it.
I've never seen such intense campaigning from her husband, and
even her daughter.
And all the volunteers that they put into this state. And no, she actually did a lot of hard work in that state and spent a lot of money in that state and called in all her IOUs from the state leadership. And yet, in spite of that, of course, she did not get too much. Now, looking back, I would say that she made several mistakes, of course, but you know, it is the package itself that is really the one that is not acceptable, and that is that she is so in bed with Wall Street and the big corporations,
the insurance companies, the pharmaceutical companies,
and especially the pharmaceutical companies, that she's really out of touch, unfortunately, with the common person who is trying to just make a living. So that is one of the things that's going on. Now, before we move up to Donald Trump, because although there's so much energy in this Democratic Bernie versus Hillary movement, there is just as equally energetic and very active participation of the Republican Party.
Absolutely.
And obviously, unfortunately, I did not go to the Republican Committee Democratic Party to observe firsthand on what was going on in there. But the way that Donald Trump approached the party is that he literally is really like an entertainer. He goes to the stage, no written scripts, basically no agenda, all other than what he already said. And this is his biggest attraction. He participated, or he allowed audience participation. You know how it is when you go to a show or a comic strip and and then you start pointing to an audience and so on. And
don't you agree?
Right. And they all were just literally standing and ovations and literally bringing the house down. I mean, he can generate that kind of energy.
Right. But there's something very frightening about what he does generate. There was some comparisons, and I don't want to get dramatic about these comparisons, but he incites a feeling of we're not as strong as we could be. Our military has to be stronger. We're going to have a wall against, Mexico. We're going to, it's the Mexican illegals, it's the Syrians, it's the Muslims, it's whatever. It's these people on welfare that, are dragging us down. Then he turns around and he talks like, I'm going to make sure you get jobs. Yeah, really?
Well, again, the answer to that is this, that he basically plays the crowd and find out exactly what they want to hear and play on that. And then basically the response has been so great that he even used vulgar words to make the people stand up and cheer.
But he plays to the worst of mankind. Now.
Well, that is exactly how the old politicians were able to make the people rise up and vote for them. So he's not really inventing this, but he is going back to the time when there was no television, when there's no internet, and the way they used to campaign is through either a train station, or they just roll out the train and they start yelling and screaming about how bad that guy is, he's a commie and that kind of thing. Right. And it brings to the listeners fear, and especially in this time where everybody is having a difficult time figuring out what and where they can get their next meal from. It puts fear into their heart. And when somebody comes up and say, I will solve your problem, I will put food on your table.
Because America is the best.
And we can be great again.
We're going to be great again.
We're going to strengthen our army or military that no one can even take our soldiers and so on and so on. And we will
basically, we're not strong enough.
We're going to get rid of the ISIS and totally. Well, these are,
demagogues.
Right.
Yeah, and when I used to wonder how countries, even like Germany, how can a country, people in Germany, have fallen for what happened? I mean, it seemed. How can people? And now, when you watch somebody like Trump, you get a kind of glimpse of how that happens to people.
Well, like I said, there are fears in every one of us. There are uncertainty in every one of us. There are things that are not said but is in our mind, and there are things that we are biased against, and there are people that we blame those problems to, but we're just not able to say it. And then somebody comes in and literally say the word that you want to say, and lo and behold, you have a whole crowd cheering on everybody.
Yeah, because he's saying it.
Because
he's right.
And he's right. So if you say, well, we're going to build a wall in our southern border, everybody will cheer that and say, yeah, let's do that, let's do that.
Because it's the Mexicans.
Right. But if these people that were in that place of listening to Trump, if they go to their offices or if they go to their place of business and they start saying that we're going to build a wall, they'll probably be run out of their office. So they're not going to say that, they're afraid to say that, but it's in their mind.
It's right. He finds the prejudice and the worst in
there is
and pulls
always
it out.
But he had gone one step further, because he is trying to bring out this thing called patriotism.
Yeah.
And now it is not just this is how we think it should be done, but this is how we should do it,
country.
Or otherwise you're not patriotic enough.
Right.
And that puts in a fear in my mind and my heart, for the simple reason that this is how despots and tyrants start. And I've seen it in so many times, and I've seen that as to where exactly that will lead to. And it is still happening today, especially in the Middle East and all those countries. And we talked about, well, the so-called Arab Spring, and yes, it will come to that says, well, if you are not with us, then we are going to.
Then you're against us.
And you become our enemy.
Yep.
And before you know it, there will be a lot of trumpets marching and knocking on your door and say, well, are you with us? Are you going to come with us and build that wall? And then obviously everyone will say, yeah, we will have to go in. So initially I look at...
Everyone would say yes?
Yeah. So initially I look at Trump and say, well, he's just an entertainer. You see, basically it's no different than going to a comedy show and, you insult this group of people, everybody laughed at it and give them a standing ovation, and then you pick up this guy's, skin color, and then you make fun of that and everybody, and then all of a sudden, before you know it, here is a person who plays into that kind of a game, but is serious to say, when I become president,
I'm going to have that power.
We're going to do it. Now that becomes a very dangerous effect, because there are some nuts out there who will definitely become very active.
But there are a lot of people who actually, I don't know what to say to people when they tell me they like Trump. I think what they like is the plain spokenness, I'm not sure what it is they like.
Well, initially
I hear him, I can't listen to him.
Well, initially I thought that, well, gee, he is saying things that are not politically correct, but it's about time that people say it the way it is. And so I said, well, yeah, that's a relief, because now people are able to express their opinions and what their biases are without having to respond to the politically correct officers. Initially, that's what attracted people. Well, here's a man who is standing in front of us, and he is not concerned about what he says, because he's not concerned about what politically correct terms would be. So, and versus here's the 14 other candidates who are very, very careful of what they say, who they address this to, because they're concerned that just one slip of the tongue that is not politically correct, they'll be out of there.
Well, except there is another candidate that does speak his mind and says it like it is, but is still a gentleman. He still has integrity. He still has humanity, and he has the courage to say it just like it is. So it's the vulgarness of him that just bothers me so much,
well,
and how he inflames people.
And he basically, like I said, put it in a way that you're going to say, well, this is them versus us. Now, them being the Mexicans, the Muslims, the poor, and the Chinese, because
right.
And so on. So that is a very, I would say, almost primitive way of getting people to come to your side, because I've seen that before in Indonesia when Sukarno was running for president. The country was so poor. I mean, it was so devastated by graft and corruption, and all of a sudden they said, well, it's because the Chinese are hoarding all the monies. So before you know it, they were going into Chinese grocery stores and destroying them, and so on and so on, because that was the cause of why they were very poor. So it's the same thing here. You blame it on a certain group of people, and immediately you will have a group of core people that will do whatever you say to them. And this is where, unfortunately, is where Trump is heading towards. Initially, it was just saying, well, I'm not concerned about saying things that are politically incorrect. I'm going to say it the way it is. and so that went through. Now he's saying, well, we are making America great again, and if you are not with me, then you must be not patriotic enough. And now he's saying that it's because of that, and it's because of this group of people, and because of that we all are in this situation, and we're all in the same boat.
How can, I mean, people must understand that, first of all, he's a billionaire. He thinks he can buy the White House. You've got another billionaire coming up that if Bernie continues to do as well as he's doing, Bloomberg wants to jump in to make sure that he doesn't get the White House. He'll be the billionaire that'll buy the White What?
Well, Bloomberg said that he's ready to spend $1 billion
to get the White House.
Yeah.
But what is it that people will vote against their own interest? I still don't understand it, because there is no way. You and I have both had, we've seen the way Trump does business. We've seen it. Anybody can Google Trump business acumen on the internet, and you can see what he has done. I mean, oh, it's great. He's done all these things, and he's gone bankrupt, and look, he got himself back up, picked himself back up, and did it again, and went bankrupt again. It's not his money. He doesn't play with his money. There's a reason why he is a billionaire. He never plays with his money. Look at the people that he has ripped off. The old woman in Florida, how long, I mean, she was trying to sue him for what he did. I mean, you look at time and time again, he takes advantage, will take your money. It's another siphon the money up from the top will just siphon the money right up.
Well, anyways, that was my observation as far as the Republican Party were concerned, and of course, Trump has a very big margin as far as his winning, and he'll probably continue to win, because now that the campaign is going down south, he's going to gather plenty of votes.
I don't know how well it'll be interesting to see.
So it will be interesting to see.
Yeah.
But again, the New York Post, I think, this morning was saying that the dawn of the brain dead went marching in New Hampshire. So.
The dawn of the brain dead?
Right.
Went marching in New Hampshire.
Yeah.
Well, there's one other thing I'd like to get back to, though, and that is how the mainstream media really shortchanges the American public. More than any other country right now, I think we do not have freedom of the press, because the press is, again, owned by so few people, and they set the tone. So consequently, things that should have been in the news aren't. I know that we have not seen any of the riots in Chile over the Trans-Pacific Partnership. We saw none of the riots in Indonesia about the Trans-Pacific Partnership. In Europe, they have been rioting and protesting. Even in the United States, we had a massive protest in November in Washington over the Trans-Pacific Partnership, and yet nothing. I wanted to be sure I was correct, and I went online and I searched for any news program that talked about the Trans-Pacific Partnership. If please do go on YouTube. If you go on YouTube and type in redacted, there is a comedian. I was going to bring a tape of him in, but I wasn't sure if it would be allowed, because he does bleep out a lot of words, and he is a little...
That's why he can only be shown on YouTube, because there's no network who...
He's on a network.
Yeah.
He is on a network. But you can find him more easily, I think, on YouTube. He's terribly funny, but it's sad. I mean, it's sad that this is funny, that he can talk about the fact that here you have a major trade agreement that includes what, 40% of the entire world, and not one news media covers it. It's being signed. It's going to control your life. The president signs it, and not one of the mainstream TV stations even bothered to have a little blurb. So I went online to find out, well, where do you find this news? Okay, the first place that comes up about the Trans-Pacific Partnership is the BBC. The BBC did record it, and it actually talked about the 12 countries that signed it in New Zealand, but it also talked about the huge protest that took place in New Zealand. Democracy Now! Again, the one news program I watch regularly, is again the only news program that actually covered it extensively. Talked about the signing, talked about what was in it, talked about the number of protests, a lot. Controversial TPP Pact signed amid New Zealand protests. That was in Al Jazeera. You probably saw it on that because you follow Al Jazeera occasionally.
They're no longer on the air. Yeah.
Yeah, so it was on there. Global News, Canada. That's a Canadian station. Canada has signed the TPP, but you also will find out the number of Canadians that have been protesting. Channel News Asia, TPP signing marks important milestone for regional trade. But again, they had to not quite talk about the number of protests that were going on. CBC, which is another Canadian news station, carried it a number of times. And the rest of these I've never heard about. Oh, Independent CO from the UK. TPP signed, the biggest global threat to internet, agreed. So that's where you can get your news. That is when you're having something that's happening where corporations, global corporations, multinational corporations have devised what they want in a trade agreement that will totally control your life. That's how the news gets to us.
Well, if you remember our very first show with this program is where do you get the news? How do you read the news? And what questions should you ask? And also recheck the facts and so on. So it's no longer that, well, it used to be, I think, one of those television shows that you say, well, the anchor is the most trusted person in the world.
Oh.
And so people used to rely on their news coming from those anchor
There is
men.
no Walter Cronkite.
And well, that had changed since. And of course, big newspapers especially now are so powerful that they can actually print whatever they want, who they are supporting. And again, they can only print those that they, support. So you can no longer get
like news. That's,
right.
That's the terrible thing.
So you can no longer get real news if you rely on only one media. And so you have to kind of balance it, look it up and so on. And it becomes kind of tiring because now, instead of my just watching the tube, not only will I watch the tube, but I will say to myself, I wonder if that is true, or I wonder what are the facts and so on.
Or you don't even get it on there, though.
Right. And then you go to do your Google search, and then you read the Wikipedia, and Wikipedia has been corrected so many times that you don't remember, and you don't know exactly what is true and what is not true. So that is the whole problem with what we have right now. We're just oversaturated with information, and a lot of them are made up information, and a lot of them are like garbage in and garbage out. That's exactly what we're saying.
when the news is that 40 cats are let loose in a facility, that makes the front page, and the things that are really important never appear in the paper. There is a problem.
And again, there used to be a responsibility and responsible journalism. Now you don't see that anymore.
The one place, I think you and I have said this, that when we want in-depth information about something, usually we get it from a book that was written by a journalist that maybe was able to have a very short little article in a newspaper. I mean, The Guardian generally prints.
Unfortunately, those books comes out several years after,
afterwards.
And so you really don't know what the truth is when you see campaigns like Hillary is saying, well, I'm going to be very strict about Wall Street. I'm not going to just tell them to cut it out.
Right.
And
I've been very consistent. I've always been consistent.
And then you look at, well, how much has Goldman Sachs given to her, and so on and so on. And these are not usually found in the news, so you have to do your own digging. And you might want to look at the election form or return from, officially filed, and yet that's even not,
That's
sometimes
not,
good
yeah.
enough. So there's a lot of things that we're supposed to know, but we're supposed to be able to digest, but now it's becoming to be difficult because now we don't know which are to separate, what needs to be filtered out. So that's why people like Trump can go up on the stage and they can say whatever he wants and feel the energy of that place and saying,
I saw 1,000 Muslims jumping and having a parade in New Jersey.
So this seems to be a trigger that will incite the people, and so he uses that just like a comedian would.
Yeah.
All right. And so initially, that is good and fun, and it's good comedy and it's good response. But then when you really put that into your core agenda and make people believe that that is really how you feel about things, and this is what you're going to do once you become president, then that becomes a dangerous situation.
I know. To me, it's just, all of it is really frightening, but most frightening to me is the fact that, and that's why we had our very first show on where do you get your news, because that to me is the most frightening thing. Without an absolutely free press, without investigative journalists, and now you can't even have investigative journalists because they'll be jailed for espionage. I mean, you have every whistleblower that would have talked to a journalist now. There've been what, nine trials during Obama's presidency for espionage by people that some of them actually went through their chain of command to tell people this was wrong. Our government shouldn't be doing this. This is against the law. And when it finally got to Congress, all of a sudden they're arrested for betraying, classified information. When it's classified because it's illegal, and then you have, that's sick. Classify it because it's illegal.
It's the eye of the beholder. Anyways, we were going to talk about the cost of pharmaceutical drugs, because this is also one hot topic that is also part of the election and campaign agenda. And different people, of course, have different ideas on how it should be controlled, and is there a need to control this? What is the FDA doing about this, and what the big pharmaceutical companies doing about this? Will they be allowing some people like Michael, what's his name, strictly to just come in and pick up a life-saving drug and charge you $750? I mean, why not $1,500? Why not $2,000?
Right.
Well, actually, some other people
They
did.
were doing it, I know.
But I will explain that to you also as to why it was allowed by their industry, by that industry.
And I think that, but speaking about what would be allowed and how far the pharmaceutical companies can push it, during all this campaigning, you do know that Bernie Sanders went back and blocked the appointment of the doctor that had, you were pointing out to me, he had, in one paper, he had to acknowledge that these 32 pharmaceutical companies had all paid him at one time. So, you know, I mean, he blocked that because of his strong ties to all of these pharmaceutical companies. It's like having the Monsanto guy be our food czar, which was absurd. But we only have about 5 minutes left, so I do want to talk about next week.
Okay.
Because on next week's show, we have State Senator Kathy Austin will be with us. So if you have some questions that you want us to pose to Senator Austin, please go on Facebook, Norwich Confidential, and drop us a quick message, and we will make sure that she gets the question. Also, you're going to have a couple of things that you want to talk to her about, right?
Oh, yes, yes. I'd like to find out what's going on with the GE deal. Why are they leaving the state? What's going on with Pfizer? Why are they leaving the state? And is it good for us or is it bad for us? It's good for us if we've just been subsidizing them. It's bad for us if we depend on the revenue, and now we don't have that much revenue. So what about other companies? What about other factories? Why aren't they coming to the state? How friendly are we in terms of business? Are we just depending on the multimillionaires that resides in Connecticut, and we put state income tax to them, putting high taxes on our gasoline and high taxes on our cigarettes? And is that going to be sustainable in the future? So who's going to pay for all the expenses that the state government spends?
And I mean, there are, this will be a very good discussion next week, because it always bothers me that we keep giving away everything and get nothing really in return, but they're the first ones to say, but look at all the jobs we create, that grocery store, that whatever. Well, yeah, and they have no consideration about any of those people when they're ready to move out. So, but we also want to give a big thanks to Greg, who's been working our booth by himself for quite a while now. I think Mike is expected to come back and give him a hand, or at least give him some company in the booth anyway. Greg doesn't need a hand. You've been doing a great job, Greg. Thank you so much.
Yes.
We appreciate your coming in tonight, because we thought we would be off, but we are. Turns out that the meeting wasn't taking place. Also, so that's Kathy Austin on the 17th. A few of us are meeting with Joe Courtney on the 19th, so I'm going to see if I can't get him to give us a date when our congressman, our U.S. congressman, will come on the show and maybe talk to us about some of the issues that are pressing for us and the difficulty he has.
Well, we'll let you know.
Yes, we'll see if I can't pin him down to a date to come on the show. Okay, so we will be back next week with State Senator Kathy Austin. I'm Bonnie Hong.
And I'm Ben Hong.
And have a good evening.
And good night. We'll see you next week.
Thank you.